Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed looking at all your pictures and look forward to talking about them this evening.
Okay, and Steve, you're going to be sharing the screen for the images. You're muted, Steve, so I'm not sure if...
I see it, the title and everything.
Yeah, are you seeing Creative Basic 3 images?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Bill, since I'm having audio problems, you'll need to read these as well.
Okay. Creating, Thursday, June 10th, 2021. Basic, 3 images. Next.
Whoa.
Bangkok Flower Market.
Wow.
Yeah, I think on this one is pretty bold and brilliant. And the title and the image, I think, work exceptionally well together because the image is not at all representational, yet Bangkok Flower Market implies the exotic, which this image definitely has. And while they are purely geometric forms, the image is reminiscent of flower petals, so that kind of works together. The shapes and the colors give me the feeling that it's like exploding from the center. The whitish area in the upper right-hand corner kind of mirrors the darker area in the lower left-hand corner. And that, I think, kind of works together, kind of gives the image the feeling that it's spinning. But I do think you should think maybe a little bit more about that upper right-hand corner. I'm not sure that the use of a neutral, low saturation color really works with all the rest. So it kind of draws people's attention up in that area. And so you might want to consider some alternate means of achieving the same effect with something that isn't drawing yourself away from a lot of the rest of the area. Okay, thanks.
Puppy Magic.
Now, in contrast to the previous image, which was kind of exciting and dragging you forward, this one has the more contemplative feel to it. And it's a really good example of translating a visual concept into concrete form. It's simple, yet elegant. And so it more than, so it's simple and elegant. The dark lines through it are very reminiscent of the veins and flower petals. And I think that they're really helping to pull the whole image together. And the sort of flares of yellow in the upper side give it a little bit more energy, take it a little bit beyond just being subtle and contemplative. One thing that drew my attention was the 4 purple discs that are in the kind of in the lower left-hand corner. They just seem to me to be a little bit too geometric, a little bit too well organized and arranged compared to kind of a little bit of the more organic chaos of the rest of the image. So you might think about fooling around with those a little bit. Otherwise, the circles and discs are kind of reminiscent of raindrops or water drops on this, and I think they contribute a lot to the image. Okay, next.
Wildflowers and Barbed Wire, Bear Valley, California.
Now, this is really a great example of having a visual concept. Maybe you saw it in the field, but your imagination jumped in and said, hey, I can turn this into a really concrete form here. It's simple and elegant, yet it's very surprising as well. So it more than justifies being in the creative category. And you have these sharp, geometric, monochrome barbed wires that contrast starkly with the pastels and colors of the background and the hills in the area. And it's kind of interesting because those barbed wires almost line up with the transitions from one color to another in the background. And the locations of the wires, also kind of a metaphor about the fact that images have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. So those all are kind of, I think, working together really well. Thanks.
Creative, intermediate, 4 images. Some gave all.
Yeah, I really like the concept here of superposing the image of the plaque of the eagle on the gravestones. I think that's a really strong concept. I think one thing that's happening here, though, that I kind of feel that the eagle is probably on some kind of granite background, just like the tombstones themselves are on a granite background. So you have these kind of overlaps where the edge of the eagle's wing matches up with the edge of the tombstone. It's kind of producing, at least for me, that kind of Rubens vase image where, you know, is this a vase or is it two faces, kind of this bistable thing, and it's kind of jumping back and forth at me about what's the background, what's the foreground, and I think that's kind of distracting from, you know, a very emotional image that you're trying to convey here. But I think it's a good idea, and maybe you just have to work on a little bit more to kind of prevent that from happening. Okay, thanks.
Whirling dervish.
The petals look so much like a swirling skirt or a swirling robe. The illusion is kind of amazing. And it's such a contrast with the center of the flower, which is so sharp and so detailed with these very fine lines. It very much reminds me of watching a dancer as they spin around and they keep their head perfectly still. That really definitely gives that feeling. And I think the lighting on the center of the flower is really nice. It really shows off the shape and makes some nice color contrast there. Thank you.
Pasta al Lamborghini.
Yeah, you have a nice visual pun working with the word pun in the title. I think those two things are working quite nice together. The picture also asks 2 questions. How do I make use of the repetitive feature of all these lined up cars? And how can we take the sweeping features of a Lamborghini to the logical extreme? Now, this is a good example of taking someone else's art, the design of the Lamborghini, and interpreting it in your own way and making it your own. Okay, thanks.
Escaping from the fire.
Yeah, we've heard so many stories of animals trapped by wildfire, and they're so devastating to people to hear about these things. And here the artist is using an impressionistic effect to try and communicate the raw emotion that's associated with that situation. I think the background particularly does an excellent job of communicating the idea of a raging fire being out of control. The body of the horse is low contrast, particularly, you know, towards the lower right-hand corner. Maybe that's giving the impression of it's partially obscured by smoke, which is kind of also contributes to this. The head is much higher contrast, and I think that focus your attention on the head, which is where emotion is most strongly conveyed. And also the flying mane also is really giving you the strong sense of motion in this picture. Is there something you can do with the head in this technique you've used to maybe bring out a little bit more emotion? Maybe it's subtle, and you wouldn't want to do things that are, you know, like over the top, but that's the only thing you might think about experimenting with and seeing if you can even get a stronger effect. Okay, thanks.
Creative, advanced, 5 images.
Well, here the photographer has reimagined onion plants as swans. And one of the things is working well in this is this composition. You have basically 3 swans here. The number 3 is usually something that works out well visually as opposed to an even number. So that, and then you've position them so you have one in the distance on the far right, then you have the one closest to you and largest in the middle, and then one in the mid ground on the right hand side. I think, you know, that is a pretty strong composition that you've put together. There's a little hint of maybe a shoreline or getting close to the shore with the bushes in the far right. I think that's working quite well. And I also think that you were very smart not to try to keep everything in the frame. The fact that some of the leaves are going out of the frame, I think just gives a little bit of realism to it, maybe, in this otherwise totally imagined scene. The only little discontinuity to me is the fact that the title calls this a Technicolor world. Technicolor typically gets associated with really highly saturated, bold colors. And to me, this doesn't kind of look Technicolor-y to me, but you know, that's a minor thing. Okay, thanks.
Fireflies, perhaps.
Yeah, this is a delightfully minimalistic approach to the creative category, which I like very much. As a contrast to doing a lot of compositing and things like that, and coming up with very complicated things, which can also produce extremely good images. But sometimes simplicity just works the best. Yeah, perhaps these are fireflies, but they also remind me of maybe fine golden threads that maybe are a little bit braided together flying off. So there's that nice ability to interpret this in your own personal way. The foreground has an interesting illumination. I don't know if you used a flash or some lighting source to illuminate the foreground, but it's so realistic that it almost becomes surrealistic. And I think that adds a nice touch to this picture. Okay.
High key rendering of Mediterranean blue crabs.
The combination of high key and these purified, saturated colors transforms this scene into a graphic study. And I think that it has some interest. You have this sort of circular arrangement of the crab on the top being right side up, and then you go to the right and it's kind of rotated on its side, and then underneath it's upside down, and your eye kind of goes around and around. But there's plenty of places for your eyes to stop it as well. So that kind of gives a little dynamicism to this picture. I'm trying to decide whether the crab on the bottom should have a little bit more color, whether that, you know, I'm torn between whether that might make it look too symmetric, or maybe a little bit more symmetry would be good. You know, you'd have to just play around with that and try it and see which way you like the best. Okay, thank you.
Old barn in spring.
There's lots. Okay, it hasn't come up yet. We seem to have a little delay. Oh, my screen is frozen.
Ah.
Oh, there we go. Okay, we're back. Well, there's lots of nice detail in the barn here, and lots of nice textures. I think that is working very well. And I think that, you know, the tree is doing a nice job of framing the barn. Excuse me a minute here. Excuse me.
That's right.
And I love the wonderful soft contrast between the rose and the cyan colors in this image. I wonder if maybe there's a little bit too much green in the tree trunk. I don't, you have to play around with that a little bit maybe. The other thing I noticed in this picture is if you look at where the highest, right above the peak of the barn, and follow the tree all the way up till it gets close to the edge, there's some kind of weird pattern that, if this were an analog photograph, I would say maybe there's some damage to the emulsion there or something. But if it's a digital picture, I have no explanation of what that is. But you might want to work to make sure that goes away if you want to work on this image some more. Okay, thanks.
Celebrate.
Yeah, here's an example of using multiple composites. I don't know if this was if you photographed each of the star bursts, fireworks bursts separately and composited them, or if they all went off at once. But either way, you put them all together into a nice package. It's a very patriotic image. The individual elements in this image are very well captured. I have a feeling like I'd maybe want the flag a little bit more towards the center, not perfectly centered, but just perhaps a little bit more towards the center. Okay, thanks.
Creative Masters, 6 images. Looking into the future, a train enters a station at warp speed.
Yeah, this is another interesting composite where you've taken a picture. It appears to me like you've taken the picture of the platform from a couple different perspectives and then rotated them and then superimposed them on top of the image. And I think it works quite well because at first when I saw that bicycle on the rectangle in the kind of upper area, I thought that might be a sign for like a bicycle shop or something. And then I later realized that it's a bicycle rack, and you can see it on the right hand edge there. And the what forms the actual wall of the platform becomes a very nice ceiling over the platform and the rotated thing. So there's some, it's working together so it almost could be real. And then as you look at it some more, like you see some things, realize, oh no, there's something mysterious going on in here. So there's some verisimilitude here in the composition, but also eventually you get dragged into this topsy-turvy world. The only thing I might question is at the very top center, there's this yellow area, some kind of structure. To me anyway, that doesn't totally fit in with the rest of the image. And so I don't know, you might want to think about something else there. But other than that, this is kind of an exciting image. Okay, thanks.
Turned.
Yeah, this is a very Esker-esque image. I cannot tell if this is just some creative architecture looked at from an interesting, unusual perspective, or if the photographer did a lot of manipulation to rotate some basic building blocks or around some axes. It's just like impossible to tell. It's just, and that makes it so intriguing. I really enjoy it. The other thing I found looking at this is if I sit back and squint my eyes, it somehow transforms this image. So instead of seeing these corkscrew buildings, I see these different planes going off in different directions. So there's like a couple of different ways you can even look at this image and be captured by this weird geometry. Okay, thanks.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, with apologies to the Beatles.
Yeah. Well, I like the sort of central arc of color that sweeps across the image. I think that works very well in this image. And I think it's kind of interesting, the what might be water drops, or like this kind of hybrid between a water drop and a crystal. So that's kind of strange too. I think it'd be an interesting image even without the arachnid in there, but the contrast between the organic forms and the kind of geometric forms that seem to be embedded in the water drops, I think makes it even more interesting. Okay, thanks.
Refraction.
Yeah, this is definitely an example of turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. I wonder if you've shown this to other people and got their reaction to it. And the reason I say that is because I had no clue what this thing was. I thought it was just a very abstract geometric forms that you had put together. But then I saw in the one third point in the lower right-hand corner, the logo for safety glass. And then suddenly, immediately it popped to me that, oh, this is the side window and side view mirror of an automobile. Now, the question I guess I have for the two questions for the maker: one, is that what happens to anybody else? And two, is that what you want to happen? Do you want to drag them into suddenly realizing it's an automobile, or do you want to postpone that realization for as long as possible? Either way is fine. It's just what you want to accomplish with it. And I do like the kind of bluish thing in here that looks like, you know, the refraction you get on this when you have like oil on the surface of water. That kind of color pattern is interesting. Okay, thanks.
The process of peeling.
Yeah, there's lovely colors in this thing, and I think that is interesting, the kind of glow effect that exists in this image. It gives it kind of this double exposure, time-lapsed feel to it, which, you know, emphasizes the process part of what you've pulled out in your title. So I think that's, you know, it's pretty from the colors, and then it has that added little extra effect there. Okay, thanks.
No exit.
Yeah, this gives me a strong sense of vertigo. Whoever did this, I think, applied considerable both technical and artistic skill, because you had to somehow distort it, because it's basically upside down, but you distorted it in such a way to have to create a place for the person to sit and then get them in there somehow. I don't know how you did that. I'm not totally convinced of the realism of the light on the person. On the face, it seems to be coming from the maybe upper left, but I feel like the strongest light sources are behind and to the right of the person. So there's a little bit of incongruity there. It's interesting that the highest contrast item in this image are the shoes. So you have these, they're rather small, but they pretty much jump out at you. And that makes me think they must have some metaphorical significance. Okay, thanks.
Monochrome basic, 3 images. The Kauai Peaks viewed from the Colby Pass Trail.
I really like the panoramic aspect here, really giving you a broad sense of this place and bringing in a lot of things into this image. Sometimes, you know, photography can work two ways, right? Usually it's often thought of as the art of taking things away. So you crop in, you clone out, you darken, you lighten, focus on the key image. But it doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes it's good to give the person a lot of things to look at, and I think, you know, that's working well. I will point out that, you know, if you wanted to, it would be a perfectly great image, in my opinion, if you cropped out everything on the right, right up to that big boulder that's just to the right of the path. And you'd have a totally different picture, but one that looks really, really cool in my opinion. Now, you know, the path, I think, is a little bit too far to the left to really fulfill, you know, what we talk about, a leading line bringing you into the picture. But on the other hand, that line of the path, which goes from the lower left and up to the right, kind of mirrors against the rock pattern on the other side, which is going from the lower right and heading up and to the left. And now you've got kind of this funnel effect that's kind of bringing you in, and then you have the mountains in the background. The relatively low contrast in the mountains, I think, works nicely. It gives them a sense of distance. You might consider a little bit of contrast boost in the foreground to give it a little bit, maybe a little bit more drama. You got to be careful. You don't want to overdo it, but that might be something to play around with. Okay, thanks.
Morning light.
Yeah, there's great detail in the bird and the post that works, I think, quite well. You might consider putting a little bit more contrast in the shadow area of the wing. You're kind of losing some detail there, sort of going to a little bit of a muddy gray. So what you might do there is to lower the intensity or the strength of the darkest areas while leaving the lighter areas alone. So you might bring in a little bit of some dark lines in there to kind of give it a little bit more definition. The modeled background, I think, is works really well. You're using kind of the traditional approach of having the subject look into the large negative space area, and that is, you know, tradition because it works so well. Not a rule, but it does often work quite well. But you might try to experiment with even cropping off maybe up to half of the negative space on the left-hand side. It would still have more there, so the bird's still looking at it, but might bring a little bit more attention to the bird. On the other hand, you may think that if you do that, it becomes a little bit too punchy and you want to give it a more subtle effect, and you can achieve that doing it the way that you've done. Okay, thank you.
A journey.
Yeah, the fog and the clouds give a great sense of depth to this picture. Kind of really, you know, makes it romantic. I did observe a couple of things which I'm maybe a little bit puzzled by. The clouds in the big open space, they look like they're composed of like rings. And so is that a little bit of posturization going on, or is that naturally how it looks? It's a little bit worrisome to me. The other thing is, at least when I was looking at it, the very, very edge of the two mountains on the right are the edges that are facing towards the left. The very, very edge was quite a bit darker and sharper than the rest of the mountains. I'm not sure why that is. It could be that there were halos that you tried to eliminate, or maybe you were doing some masking to have different contrasts in different areas, but it's probably something that 95% of the people wouldn't notice. But if you have a judge who's staring at it, you know, real up close, they will notice things like that. Okay, thanks.
Monochrome intermediate, 3 images. Symmetry is underrated.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a case where the photographer was given lemons and made lemonade. I can imagine you say, oh, this is a beautiful example of symmetry. You set your camera up perfectly right. You got everything lined up. And sure enough, in the center, you have the doorbells and those other knobs, nice and symmetric. And then you go out to the white features and everything's symmetric. And then you go out a little bit more and you say, wait a minute. The keyholes aren't at the same level. The doorknobs are a little bit different. Oh, there goes my symmetry out the window. And so you decided to make a virtue of that by highlighting it. I think that's, a great idea. Okay, thanks. Yeah, next, please.
Lacy flower.
Yeah, it's quite dramatic. And I love the circular symmetry. I love how the density of the filaments gets less and less and less as you move further and further outside to the outside. And simultaneously, it's getting darker and darker and darker and starts to almost fade into the background. But nonetheless, there's like a pretty sharp border where the flower ends and the background begins. And I can almost imagine those different branches continuing to branch and continue to go off and go off. If any of you are familiar with fractals, this is a really good example of fractal geometry, and that makes it very interesting to me. Thank you.
Patiently waiting for renewal.
Yeah, this image captures a certain amount of nostalgia. I think the darkness of the shed and the, just barely enough detail in the shed just almost disappears into total shadow. I think that adds to the mood and allows the car itself to stand out and brings a little bit more detail and makes the image quite poignant. I think you picked a good angle, to just get a little bit of the side, but mostly the front and grill area and a little bit of the top of the hood. I think that kind of gives a feeling of the thing really is in waiting in this shed. Thank you.
Monochrome advanced, 8 images. Big dune white fire sunrise.
Yeah, we've all seen, I think most of us have seen quite a few images of the sinuous ridge of sand dunes. But this is really original take on that canonical scene. You have the sinuous shape, you have the illuminated area kind of changing shape as it in size as it disappears into the distance. Your eye follows that. You've got sort of filaments of light flowing away from that. It almost gives a sense of light as a liquid spreading around. I do wonder if maybe it's really hard to say, but in the furthest bend to the left, there's a pretty big area of pure white there. And I just wonder if you could bring up some detail in the right-hand side of that area, so it's not quite so big and saturated, whether that would improve it. It's hard to say because the white river of light is like the key to this image for sure. Okay, thank you.
Casablanca's waterfront, Morocco.
Yeah, so the architect here has made this nice curve to this walkway, and you've exploited that to give a very nice leading line that brings you right into the picture to see the rest of the city as well. You have a good range of tones. There's some very dark blacks. There's some very good highlights, kind of a continuous range of tones between them. I particularly like the clouds. you know, you don't have to have the clouds go to pure white to give the impression of lightness and fluffiness. I think, you know, having a lot of detail everywhere, I think is working quite well here. The only, you might experiment with, again, as an experiment, cropping in from the right-hand side and getting rid of a lot of that negative space in the upper right-hand corner where there's no clouds. I don't think anything critical get lost if you do that. But it might, I mean, strengthen the impact of the clouds on the image. Okay, thanks.
When I was young, I never thought I would ever be old.
Yeah, I have to admit that I can't really understand this image too well, so it makes it very difficult for me to make any really good comments on it. I mean, I do see some interesting textures in here and some interesting shapes. Some of them are reminiscent of skin to me, and maybe some patches of, you know, dark patches on skin, which are symptomatic of being old. Someone else may see a lot more in this image than I'm seeing, and you should get maybe them to critique it. I would say, given that, and so not knowing really what you're trying to accomplish, my comments could be totally off base. But I was thinking maybe you could strengthen it up by cropping out as much of the kind of out of focus and texture free area on the left hand side as you dare, and even maybe a little bit on the coming in from the right hand side, because there's a lot of area that's kind of just the same, and like I kind of get the message already. And then that will bring a little bit more focus on the shapes, geometry, and the textures. But again, like I said, I could be totally off base here. So, okay, thanks.
Teasels at morning light.
You know, there may be very little, if any, pure black in this image, but I think the darkest parts are dark enough, and then having more of the image in the mid tones and then some nice light highlights gives it a very light and airy feel, which I think is working quite well. You know, you don't have to always have the tone range from darkest black to whitest white, and then like a perfectly even distribution of all the tones in between. You know, the choice of how you use those tones is really up to you in terms of what message you're trying to get across with the image. And I think here you have predominantly mid-tones and some highlights, and I think that does give gives the teasels this more delicate feel where you really emphasize that fine structure. In real life, these aren't that soft, but they kind of feel soft in this picture, which is kind of interesting. I think your depth of field is nicely calibrated. So you have the background being just a sort of pattern that these teasels stand out. And you picked a nice arrangement of how the teasels go across the frame. Okay, thank you.
In the forest.
Yeah, this is a landscape. I think this falls more in the category of an intimate landscape as opposed to sweeping vistas rather. And here the emphasis really is on the play of light and shadow. And, you know, forest scenes can be very confusing and crowded, but this avoids that problem by, number one, using this hillside and have the ferns be this carpet and kind of going up into where the trees are. And then there is a lot of light space between the trees, particularly in the far background. And a lot of the trees in the distance are getting lower and lower contrast, which kind of opens up opens up the picture. The ferns are very light. I don't know whether this infrared green filter or just how you happen to do the processing on this, but I think it is keeping with this kind of lightness in the feel. You kind of have a triangle going on here where the trees, where things are kind of sloping large. The base of the triangle is like at the bottom and a little bit to the left, and it's kind of going up to a point in the upper right hand corner. That gives some drama to this image as opposed to something that's shot straight on. Thank you.
In good hands.
It's a very emotional image with a strong contrast between the wrinkled hand against the very smooth skin of the baby. It's mostly in the mid-tones, rather low contrast. On the one hand, this gives it kind of the soft, gentle feel, but it also, at least in my opinion, makes it a little bit muddy. You might want to consider increasing the contrast selectively, probably more so in the hand, to bring out a little bit of the structure there and make the contrast between the hand and the baby a little bit greater even than it already is. I don't think the hand going out of focus is a problem. I think that's fine, except perhaps maybe the closest fingernail might be better if that was a little bit in better focus. Okay, thanks.
Steampunk.
Oh, that's a very lively image. I love the complementary expressions on the two faces, where one is very lively and looking forward, the other one's kind of leaning back and just smiling enigmatically. I think that makes it, and the two faces are arranged on a diagonal, going from the lower left to the upper right. I think that works very well as a pose. Excuse me.
We're more than just a vivid color.
I'm not done. Can you go back, please? Yeah. I like the way the background has been set to all midtones. That really separates out the main subjects from the background, and it looks like there might have been harsh lighting, but somehow you've managed to not have any harsh shadows, which I think is really good. Okay, thank you.
We're more than just a vivid color.
Well, as the title suggests, the photographers use monochrome to focus our interest on the form rather than the colors, which presumably are brilliant and interesting in their own right. They've used a very strong diagonal in the composition, and we kind of have the evolution of the flowers themselves from fully open to starting to close to more of a seed. And you could even see that you could draw lines connecting the tips of the flowers with the tip of the seed, and you not only have a diagonal, but you have a triangle that you form. That's another useful compositional element that I think is being exploited quite well here. There's just enough detail in the background to make it a little bit interesting as opposed to a pure black. Gives it a more natural feel as opposed to a studio portrait feel. The lower left-hand corner is a little bit light, in my opinion, compared to the rest of the background. You might want to darken that just a tad bit to make it more consistent and de-emphasize that kind of looks like a rock or something there, which is so different than the vegetation of the rest of the background. Thank you.
Monochrome masters 8 images.
Yeah, I really, oops, sorry. Go ahead. Could you read the title, please?
Blacksmith at Sturgeon Mills.
The lighting models the features on the face very well. There's no harsh shadows, but you can see, you know, cheekbones and lips and nose. I think that's working quite well. I like the smoke coming off. That's very interesting. I kind of would like to maybe see a blacksmith tool or something so that I know that this is a blacksmith. The glare in his glasses is really, I think, too much. I at first thought that it was the whites of his eyes just glowing demon-like, and that was quite distracting from the rest of the image. I don't think you can fix that by just darkening it, because I think you'll end up with like just gray blobs there. So, I mean, if you've taken multiple pictures of this person, you may be able to find little bits and pieces in your other photographs that you can kind of clone in there and reconstruct a little bit of his eye to get rid of that glare. I think that would make a big difference in the picture. Thanks.
Philodendron, a study in light and shadow. A grayscale image with a single color tone added, ANPA 739-0, add pro green, soft light mode at 73%.
Okay, so we have instructions about how this was made. This is probably the most extreme example of toning I have seen in quite a while, and it does certainly create a dramatic effect. It's a monochrome image for sure, but you imagine that these leaves probably are green in real life, so it kind of starts to make you think, oh, this is a little bit realistic here. It's interesting. There's a difference between toning an image and tinting an image. If you tone an image, that comes from the original use in chemical photography, where you'd put your black and white print in a chemical bath, and the chemical would react to the silver to turn it a color. And so the black areas would pick up the most color, and the light areas would pick up the least color. And that's characteristic of a toned image, where if you tint it, kind of the opposite happens. The image is almost graphic in nature. It's not only a study in light and shadow, as the title kind of mentions, but it's also a study in lines. You have all these dramatic lines going on a diagonal from the lower to the upper left-hand corner. The little tiny spheres that look like peas in a pod or something, I think that maybe it distracts a little bit from your overall feeling that the strong diagonals are given. You might think about that. Okay, next.
Waiting for a ride to church in the slum of Kibera, Nairobi, Kenya.
So this is a very classic 3/4 pose with the way the face is positioned. We see mostly one side of his face, but just a little bit of the eye from the other side. And we have the lighting coming in from the left, which is modeling the features of his face, but fortunately not causing any really sharp, prominent shadows. But it really brings out kind of the texture of his face and the shape of his face. You're also using this shooting up from a low position. It tends to give kind of a heroic feel to the person. It's kind of a traditional shot for that. And traditionally, if you read old books on posing people, you would be told that this is a pose you use with men because it makes them look heroic. But I don't see any reason why women can't be heroic too. And you can use the same pose with women, at least these days. I think the background adds a nice context to it. There's certainly enough detail to make you feel like where this person is. Yeah, but on the other hand, I think the lighting clearly separates the person from the background. Okay, thanks.
St. Patrick Church across from the Contemporary Jewish Museum.
Yeah, the high contrast and fine detail gives an overall gritty feel to this image. They're really interesting because there's just a few figures of people kind of scattered through this image, which, you know, maybe this was taken in these days where people are just starting to get out into the city again, so people are pretty widely spaced. But the gritty nature gives kind of an interesting character to each of those people. I actually think that that adds a lot to this picture that's otherwise about architecture. A couple of important compositional elements I noticed. That there's really 2-point perspective here where you see the slope of the church going down and to the right, but much stronger is the vanishing point where the street is disappearing into the distance. And those two things are, I think, are very strong parts of what makes this image work. I think there's a slight inward tilt of the church building, which maybe that's working with the drastic church of the Contemporary Jewish Museum to kind of focus everything into kind of this funnel that's going in. I do wonder whether, and one way to see how important that was is to use perspective distortion and make the church be standing still, straight up and down, and see if that makes the picture better or worse. It's certainly not, I wouldn't say it's distracting right at the moment. You might think that it might be that the high-rise building in the distance, it's on a tilt too. That might be a little bit more distracting, and you could experiment with trying to straighten that up. Okay, thanks.
Out for a ride.
Well, this is a great example of panning to capture motion. Clearly, the photographer here was following the bicyclists with their camera, allowed a sharp capture of them while the background is motion blurred and gives a sense of motion. But, you know, there's a little bit more subtle things you have to think about when you do take a picture like this, and that is the choice of shutter speed is important. In this case, you've got a shutter speed so that when combined with panning, most of the person is sharp, but if you look at like the legs and feet, they are motion blurred. So that gives a sense of action to the person that's running the bicycle. So I think that, you know, that's a nice choice. Maybe you could bring out a little bit more detail in the shorts. I don't think that's critical, but it's something to consider. Okay, thank you.
Taj Mahal.
Yeah, very unusual perspective on an iconic building. It's really an example of interpreting a work of art and making your own. When I visited this building, there was absolutely no water there, and there was no reflection. Here, you're using how thin the water is as just enough to give a reflection, but you're adding all this texture on top of the image and giving it a little bit of a even more romantic feel than the building is itself, which is kind of interesting. The building in the background is a little bit lower contrast and fading. I think that helps to push it in the background and keep your focus. There's really only mid-tones in the reflection, but I think that is also working in this particular case. It just kind of makes the whole thing a little bit more mysterious. Okay, thanks.
Looking up.
Yeah, very strong graphic design in this picture. You have converging lines coming up into the sky. Interesting that the clouds right above the building also have vertical lines in them. So that's kind of I don't know whether you saw that and that's what caused you to take this particular picture, but either way, it's adding a lot. So you have the diagonal lines of the clouds coming down, you have the buildings coming up. That kind of working very, very well. And it would have been just dead space where those clouds are if those clouds hadn't been there. So this is working much better. Okay, thanks.
Bracketing is always necessary in a slot canyon.
Yeah, we're breaking an old tradition in landscape photography. It's kind of this unwritten rule in the classical modern landscape. Well, actually, classical landscape photography is you never include people. Here, the person is kind of the focus of the whole photograph. You have beautiful textures in the stone, fading from light as you go from the center out, fades to black. You have large areas of black, and in some areas there's probably no detail, but I think that is working as kind of a framing element that's keeping you into in the light. The other interesting thing is you often think of, I guess another standard thing about in composition is you usually put the darkest areas at the bottom because they quote unquote feel heavy, and heavy should be at the bottom. But here, the dark is at the top, so the heaviness is almost at the top, and that almost gives it this little bit of instability to this image. But you have this beautiful expanding light coming down and then illuminating the photographer. So I think that's working quite effectively. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll take about a 5-minute break and then go on to the last two categories, nature and pictorial.
Great.
Take 4 images. Bee fly, Bombilius gerone subspecies, Punta Mita, Mexico. This fly is a bee mimic, helping it to ward off predators. The long proboscis beak allows it to access nectar where other insects cannot.
Yeah, this is a great macro shot. The title points out the bee mimic, points out the proboscis, and both of those features are clearly visible in the photograph. The hairs, even the eye facets are visible in this picture. That's great. The feeding behavior is clearly visible as well and expanded upon in the title. The location is given, the scientific name is given. Basically hits all the criteria for a good nature entry. You know, it's very difficult to get everything in focus, and here the key things are in focus, I believe. The fact that the wings are a little bit out of focus is pretty much acceptable, probably unless you were the person really trying to identify this insect, and then you might say, oh, but the veins in the wings are a key that you use to identify the species, and then probably want the wings in focus. But for our purposes, I think this is just fine. Thank you.
Desert elephants in the Huanib River Valley, Namibia.
It's a beautiful panoramic shot. It shows the communal nature of these animals, gives a good indication of their habitat. It's very important that you did identify Nambia as the location for a number of reasons. It's always good to identify the location in a nature shot, particularly if it isn't a backyard animal that you're photographing, or a backyard, something in your backyard that you're photographing. But in this case, why they're called desert elephants is that they live in the desert. And even though they're not a different species from the African bush elephant, they do have this limited range that makes them quite unique. In the N4C definition of nature photography, one of the primary purposes of nature photography is to use photography to educate the viewer about the natural world. The viewer can often not pick up what the key elements you're trying to communicate in the image alone. And that's what makes titles important, because they really help direct the viewer to the important parts of the image. Okay, thanks.
Male flame skimmer, Libellula saturata. This common dragonfly is native to Western North America.
That's a beautiful photograph of a beautiful animal. The eyes and the wing veins are very clearly delineated in this picture. Scientific name is given along with the location. The fact that the wings go out of focus at the edge, I don't think really detracts. The focus is really on the key features. You chose not to include much of the natural environment with this animal, so you don't have a strong nature story in how it interacts with the rest of the natural world. It's more of a portrait. And one of the ways you can take a portrait and give it more educational value is to maybe point out some key features that are visible in the photograph that might distinguish it from other species. So if you're looking at this and wanting to identify it, what do you look for to tell that this is this particular species as opposed to a different species? Okay, thank you.
The Queen Swan. The Crown has held claim to England's unmarked mute swans, Cygnus olor, since the 1200s, Bagshot Park, Berkshire, England.
Yeah, generally in any photograph of a living creature, the most important thing is to keep the eyes sharp and in focus. And I think you've done that. The head, in particular area around the eyes, is very sharp and in focus. I believe that anyone would recognize the species by seeing this photograph. I really kind of enjoyed seeing the water drops on the feathers. I hadn't really seen that in a picture of water birds before. It seems like something that's obvious. This is an atypical nature story because it's really discussing the interaction of the natural world with the human world. Okay, thanks.
Nature, intermediate, 6 images. American kestrel, Falco sparvarius. During nesting season, the male on the left actively hunts while the female patiently waits for her share.
Yeah, you've caught the birds in action here. You see them interacting with each other. You see the male with a typical food source in its beak. So that makes it a very strong story. It's a nice catchlight in the eyes, which kind of brings out life in the bird. It could be maybe a tad bit sharper, and maybe you could crop in a little bit closer. Although I think you've done a good job of showing the natural habitat, which is an important part of these stories. And maybe if you enlarged it, you would start to lose resolution, so that wouldn't work. But that's just something to try. And of course, I always appreciate when you give the scientific name. Thank you.
Quick, before Dad catches up with us.
It's a lovely shot. It's nice and sharp throughout. There's a good catchlight in the eyes. We can see detail in all the feathers. But as I mentioned, nature is a documentary division about communicating facts about the natural world. Anthropomorphizing or attributing thoughts that you can't really know that the animal is having is discouraged in this division. You could consider re-entering this in a pictorial division. Thanks.
This flower crab spider, genus Misumena, waded in the blue dix wildflower, Diclostemma capitatum, for the unsuspecting bumblebee, genus Bombus, to become a meal.
Well, this is close to a peak of action or decisive moment picture. You really have captured all aspects of nature, red in tooth and claw. All the critical elements are sharp. We can really see what's going on in this picture. So great job.
Thirsty zebra. Burchell's zebra, Equus quagga burchelli, herd drinking at a Namibian waterhole.
Well, I think you've done a good job of using the panoramic format to capitalize on the repetitive pattern of the zebras along the edge of the waterhole. Features of the zebras are clearly shown in this picture, but perhaps not those features that distinguish the Burchell's zebras from the other subspecies. And of course, water holes are of paramount importance in the desert. Thank you.
The Northern California flame skimmer dragonfly, Libellula saturata, is well camouflaged in its native habitat.
Yeah, although the dragonfly fills most of the frame, enough of the vegetation around it is shown to support your claim that it's well camouflaged with those little orange tips of the evergreens there. It's really kind of fitting in quite well. And again, we've seen a pretty good job of keeping the animal in focus, where all the veins in the wings, which are the fine detailed structures, are all clearly visible and delineated in this picture. We've got a little catch eye in the compound eyes that kind of bring it to life. You can even see some little hairs that are on the back of its head or back of its eyes, which are really fascinating. Thank you.
The great blue heron, Ardea herodias, takes flight from a marshy area of Elkhorn Slough. The prominent vegetation in the water is eelgrass.
Yeah, I think that it's a great capture of a bird in a very characteristic posture that it achieves when it's first taking off, and you're showing that very well. I think the exposure on it is quite nice. I can see detail in both the whitest areas of the bird and in the darkest areas of the bird, which is often quite a challenge to achieve. The tips of the wings are a little bit blurred. They appear to be focus blur, not motion blur. If we're looking at a motion blur, that might actually add to the picture. The fact that it's focus blur doesn't really do anything one way or the other in this case, as long as it's confined to like the tip of the bird. Kind of interesting that you identified the fact that the vegetation is eelgrass. That's a little added little nugget of information. Okay, thanks.
Nature Advanced, 5 images. Salt Creek pupfish, 1 of 3. This remnant of an ancient freshwater lake, once covering much of Death Valley, converted slowly to salt. Today, it is home to one of 9 separately evolved species of pupfish. 2. In the spring, the pupfish become active, and the luminescent yellow, purple, and blue males entice a smaller, well-camouflaged female into his aggressively defended turf. 3. They swim beside each other, form an S shape, and wiggle. With each wiggle, the female releases an egg, and the male releases sperm, which immediately fertilizes the egg.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of the use of a sequence to tell a story. In the first frame, you're using the first frame to set the scene. The second frame identifies the actors, and the third frame consummates the action. So it's a very nice story arc that you've presented here. Each image is technically well executed, and I think that is also, particularly in the second and third images, probably done under pretty difficult conditions. Okay, thanks.
The northern crab spider, Mecaphisa esperata, waits for prey amid parsley flowers.
Yeah, I think this photograph is a perfect example of how keeping the eyes in focus is the most important thing you can do in any picture of a living organism. Even with most of the body out of focus, I think we clearly recognize what this species is, and because the eyes are sharp, it doesn't even really bother us that much that so much is out of focus. We have a clear idea what the body of it looks like and its natural habitat. And I assume that you verified that this is like an ambush spider that does in fact wait for prey amidst flowers. Okay, thank you.
Lunch, one of two. Great blue herons, Ardea herodias, are typically wading birds whose diets consist mostly of small fish. But this individual has had great success hunting gophers far from wetlands. Prey is consumed by swallowing it whole, generally head first. The great blue heron has a very flexible esophagus and a stretchable stomach, rather than a crop like many other birds.
Well, for me, this sequence was very timely because in my daily walks through my neighborhood, we have some large open fields. And just recently, I've seen both blue herons and egrets stalking through that field. I'm thinking, boy, they're far away from the water. What are they doing here? And you've explained it perfectly and captured them right in the act of capturing the ground squirrel or the gopher, whatever that is. And I'm really glad that you used only 2 of your 4 images that you're allowed in the sequence, because you've captured the 2 most important things. The first photograph shows the prey very clearly being caught, and the second photograph shows the really interesting way that it just swallows this thing whole, just like it does with when it eats fish. So that was very, very amazing. And your title is working very well. The things you talk about in the title are the things that we're seeing in the image. And you're just using the title to help us understand more detail what you're showing us visually. Okay, thanks.
Sandhill crane nesting, one of 2. The female will sit on the nest from 29 to 32 days, spending all night and most of the day. During incubation, she turns the eggs and rearranges the nesting material. Cranes nest in small isolated wetlands like marshes, bogs, and swales. They prefer to nest in areas with vegetation growing in standing water.
You're muted.
Yep, thank you. I think both of these photographs are technically excellent for the same reasons that I've described in several of the previous images. So that from that point of view, they're very, very well done. It's kind of interesting. I sometimes hear from people that the judges spend too much time on titles. And it's also possible for the photographer to spend too much time on titles as well. I think the key thing is that the titles should help you understand the images. You don't have to tell everything about the subject matter. In this particular case, in these 2 images, I'm not sure. I think that, of these 2 images, one conveys a lot more information than the other. And that's the second one, where I assume that the crane is now rotating the eggs. And the interesting thing is that you talk about rotating the eggs in the other image where it's not happening. And you talk about the nest in this image when the nest is more clearly shown in the other image. I think that this image by itself stands alone, and the other image does not add enough to really justify having a whole sequence here, because there's a lot of action in this one. You're talking specifically about a very particular activity that this bird undergoes, and if you switch the orders of the title, you would be talking about it in the title, and we'd be seeing it visually in the image. Okay, thanks.
Western tiger swallowtail butterfly, Papilio rutilis, feeds on the nectar of the blossom of a California buckeye, Aesculus californica.
Yeah, the butterfly here is very clearly shown. We can see the feeler, the antennae, and a little bit of the proboscis gathering nectar from the flower. You've captured that important feeding behavior for these animals. Now, a little bit of research, and maybe you can put this in the title as well, is although this butterfly does feed on several different species of flowers, the buckeye is actually like one of its 2 favorite flowers to feed on. So I think that's an interesting fact. And since you're showing that particular flower here, it might be an interesting addition to the title. Thank you.
Nature Masters, 6 images. Doom palm is oddly shaped for a palm. Fire and drought resistant, it fruits at 30 years. It is nutritious for humans and animals. All of the tree is used by villagers in rural Kenya. Hyphen compressa.
Pictorially, I really love this image. We have kind of this almost symmetric fan of the palm trees. And then we have the sunlight catching the palm fronds and turning them yellow. And then that contrasts against their complementary color, the blue of the sky. And then we have the beautiful mountains in the far distance. It's a really lovely photograph. For anyone unfamiliar with this plant, which I certainly was unfamiliar with it, it's clearly shown, and there's lots of good information in the title. Yes, as the title says, this palm is oddly shaped, but you really could have been more specific about that, because it's not just, it's oddly shaped because it has branches. And that's a real rarity among palm species. There's only a couple of other ones that branch like this. And that's one of the things that makes this tree unique and gives it this beautiful appearance that you've so wonderfully shown in this photograph. Next.
Giraffe, 1 of 2. Stand 15 to 20 feet high with both their legs and neck, each being about 6 feet long. This is an advantage for sighting predators. However, some have difficulty drinking water. They must bend their knees to get their mouths below the water, and this puts them at great risk for being attacked by predators.
Yeah, this is an interesting use of sequence because you're comparing and contrasting 2 different features. The first one shows the fact that with the long legs and the tall, long neck, you get an advantage from having a high point of view. And then you go to the second one and it says, oh, but by the way, that kind of makes it difficult to get a drink. And they have to bend their knees to do that. It looks pretty awkward in this picture, so I can certainly understand why it could put them at greater risk. And the fact they have to bend their legs, for me, the fact that they bend their legs was a new fact for me too. So I really enjoyed learning about that. Okay, next.
Fun fact, 1 of 2. The snowy egret has yellow feet and a black bill, while a great egret is vice versa. Egretta thula and Ardea alba, respectively. Spring Lake, Santa Rosa.
So I earlier said that cute titles are generally discouraged in our nature competition. But in my humble opinion, the fun facts is something that kind of attracts people's attention and draws their interest in. I mean, I remember seeing in the back pages of the Sunday comics, there was usually one thing like Ranger Rick or something that told interesting things about the natural world, and so using that fun fact is as I think a clever way of drawing attention to that. And then I've seldom seen a sequence used to compare and contrast and teach us the difference between things. And here, I think that it's kind of true that oftentimes people who aren't into this confuse these two birds, and it's kind of this interesting symmetry of their two have their beaks and their legs just swapped in terms of colors. So it's in having those pointed out, and the individual images do clearly show those features of the bird. Thanks.
Chiton are mollusks with magnetite teeth. They travel to feed and return to their home site using ability to sense polarity in the Earth's magnetic field. Pinnacle Gulch, Sonoma Coast.
Yeah, so first of all, kudos to the photographer for entering a non-photogenic creature in the nature competition. I'm glad to see that, because it is supposed to be about educating people and not just about pretty pictures. The 8 armor plates are clearly shown here, which is the characteristic of this particular species or class of, I guess it's not a species, it's some bigger class, but you might have pointed that out in the title. Also the skirt or girdle that's around it, which no one knows what it's for, but it's clearly shown. The title is all about the teeth, and unfortunately the teeth are not visible. But the fact that the teeth are coated with magnetite is certainly intriguing. Okay, thank you.
The cuckoo wasp of the Chrysalidae family of parasitic wasps visits umbelliferae flowers such as parsley.
So the metallic coloration is very clearly shown in this picture and is very dramatic. There's a lot of detail here. If you look closely, there's these little tiny hairs sticking out of the back of this wasp, and that's kind of cool. I am not sure what it means to say it visits these flowers. Is it for food? Is it for the scenery? The interesting thing is that I found exactly the same unhelpful phrase in the Wikipedia article on cuckoo wasps. Okay, thank you.
This bracken fern, Pteridium aquilinum, growing near a madrone arbutus, which is growing out of a burnt redwood stump, sequoia, near Armstrong Woods.
Another beautiful photograph with the lens and the position of the photographer has been put to great effect to prominently display this fern in the feature, and taking a lot of advantage of some very lovely lighting that's in this scene, which is very well captured. From the nature story perspective, this is sort of like a nature oddity with the madrone growing from the burnt redwood stump. That's pretty weird and interesting. So it's kind of about nature recycling that takes place out in the natural world. I was a little bit thrown by the madrone comma arbus comma, and then I realized what was going on. This is a case, I should say, the convention, not that it's some kind of rule or requirement, but it's kind of a convention that the scientific name is put in parentheses after the common name, and that helps clearly delineate I'm now presenting a scientific name. You know, a lot of the scientific names are these weird Greek Latin things that, you know, pretty obvious that not, but sometimes in this case, the arbutus seems like it's a common name, doesn't look like a scientific name, so it might confuse people. Confused me for a while. Okay, thanks.
Pictorial, basic 2 images. The quintessential yet not lone cypress, Monterey cypress, Cupressus macrocarpa, Carmel, California.
Well, as kind of alluded to in the title, this is a iconic scene, frequently photographed and painted and otherwise visually presented, because nature has just presented us with this wonderful scene, very emotional, wrought scene. It's very difficult to be original in that situation. And the photographer here has extensively processed the image to try to give it their own interpretation. And I think mostly it works. I think the way, particularly the way the sea has been handled and the way the greenery has been handled, is working quite nice to give a different kind of emotional feel to this than a straight photograph would. I'm not sure how well it's working with the foreground rocks. That kind of hue of the rocks and saturation, I'm not sure is quite the same, projecting quite the same mood as the water and the greenery is. So it doesn't seem quite consistent. So you might want to think about some other ways of handling at least the foreground rocks. Okay, thank you.
Milky Way above a Sierra pond.
Yeah, what I found most fascinating about this image is the color palette. It's based on browns with different variations on brown. That's fairly unusual for a scene like this in my experience, but it even extends into the Milky Way, which so many people process to make it have really bright saturated colors. And you've gone totally the opposite way. The whole image is given this kind of rustic, painterly feel. And I think that's a very interesting interpretation. It's nice to see something a little bit different. Technically, I see very little star motion, so you've done a good job of choosing your exposure time. Okay, thanks.
Pictorial intermediate, 5 images. What's up, Hard Rockman?
Yeah, unlike nature, humor can fit very well in the pictorial category. And here we are interested in photography as art, and art is about making you feel something. And I think that, humor is a legitimate feeling. And here the bend of the neck, kind of the natural features of this bird in terms of its eyes and its beak, definitely is consistent with with the title of what's up. The shallow depth of field keeps us focused on those particular features which most express that emotion. But the rest of the bird is sufficiently in focus to allow us to feel this is kind of normal. Okay, thanks.
Berber farmer in the Moroccan Sahara Desert.
Well, we have an informal portrait of a person in their environment. The face is nicely illuminated. There's no harsh shadows there. You might consider giving a little bit more breathing room between the edge of the person and the right edge of the frame. It's kind of getting a little bit tight there. The person is reasonably well separated from the background, but you might consider having a little bit shallower depth of field, allowing the fronds to go a little bit soft, still recognizable, but softer. And then there's a lot of different croppings that you could play around with. I was playing around with, cropping out the sky altogether. And then I was thinking of cropping in from the left-hand side, maybe, a third or even a little bit more in, to get the focus really on that person while still maintaining the kind of environmental portraiture aspect of the person in their environment. It's just something to experiment with and see if it works for you. Next.
After the thunderstorm, Cancaril Valley, Colorado.
While it's a wonderful capture of a double rainbow, the rock formation in the foreground say front range very clearly. So we have a kind of an interesting sense of place here. You could crop in from the left just to eliminate the light cap on the hill in the distance. I think that helps. And then, you know, if you wanted to do something totally different, I'm not criticizing this picture when I'm saying this, but just to do something different for fun, what if you radically crop down from the top to make this a panorama where there's just maybe enough above the rock, maybe the same distance above the rock as the rock itself, and see how you react to that photograph. Thank you.
Sealed with a kiss.
Well, this is so cute, and you click the shutter right at the right moment. Faces are sharp. That's a little bit of light in the eyes. Now, if you wanted to play around with this image, you might think about, again, cropping down from the top to get rid of the little guy in the background, and then cropping in from the left to just eliminate his little flipper there that's sticking out. So the two animals are closer to the same size. See what that does. See if you like that. Okay, thanks.
Still life with fruit and flowers.
Well, this is a classic still life, and I'm enjoying the play of light and the rich colors. I think the fall off of light from front to back is really helping this image. That's working quite well. You might leave a little bit more space between the purple flower and the right hand edge of the frame. It's kind of almost touching there, and that kind of leads you out of the frame. I'm very much attracted by the green flower that's right in the middle and that interesting thing in the center. I find that I get a little bit distracted by the white flower directly to my left of the green flower. And so I'm wondering, I don't know if toning it down works. You really may need to just put it somewhere else where it isn't getting quite as much light as it's getting, so it's a little bit more subtle, or maybe you could rearrange the light to not hit that so hard. I generally expect more base in these kind of compositions. It's not bad the way it is, but I almost feel like it would be nice if we saw a little bit more of what it's setting on at the bottom. Now, if you wanted to really make this classic, you want to bring in a little bit of the genre of vanitas, which was very popular. And so you could put a little bug on one of the flowers, or have a fallen petal on the ground. And then that would tell people life is beautiful, but beware, because you're also mortal. Okay, thank you.
Pictorial advanced, 6 images. Spirits in a sandstone seep.
Well, I think this is excellent seeing. I mean, I could imagine kind of your shock and surprise as you saw this, and what it did in your imagination to what you were seeing. I think it would have worked even if you didn't explain it in the title, but the title is fine too. It might be more mysterious if you didn't see the plants in the ground in the foreground, but I actually think you made the right choice to include them, because what I'm seeing in this picture is a real life scene where there's real spirits in the rock that are coming forward and emerging from the cliff face. So I think it's working quite well there. Okay, next.
Seeing stars.
Well, when I first saw the title, I thought of someone hitting their head. And then I thought of the sky. So I was kind of completely taken aback when I saw starfish in this picture. So that was a kind of a pleasant surprise. I like it. It seems to me that there's more starfish off to the left-hand side, and there's no more starfish off to the right-hand side, and that kind of makes it feel a little bit unbalanced. And that's compounded by the fact that it seems to be darker on the left and brighter on the right. And so I'm thinking maybe you could try darkening the right hand edge, kind of vignette style. So you darken the corners more than the center, but kind of darken that whole area, and particularly some of the lower and the upper areas, and see if that kind of stops you from kind of sliding off to the right hand side. And similarly, there's something that's pretty bright poking in from the top border about 1/3 of the way in, that you might consider darkening that thing as well. Okay, thank you.
Family portrait.
Well, this definitely reminds me of a family portrait. The poppies look like they're illuminated from the inside, this glow coming out of them. The background is dark to make them stand out, but it has this nice little pattern to it that makes it feel a little bit more natural, a little bit less boring than if it was perfectly solid. It does feel to me like it's weighted a little bit to the left because you have the center of mass of it is a little bit over to the left, and maybe you think that's giving it a little bit of energy, and that's okay. But I kind of feel like I should move that center of mass a little bit to the center, and maybe like equal out the distance between the borders and the flower on both edges. It'll still keep it a little bit off center, but it might feel a little bit more balanced. But until you try it, you don't know for sure. Okay, thanks.
Winter Song 3.
Well, it's really lovely to have these soft pastels in the background, and then the bright red wings of the red-winged blackbird sitting on there and just chirping himself away, declaring his territory. It's really fantastic. You have a nice sweep of the branches coming in from the upper left to the upper right to the lower left. I think that works well from a compositional viewpoint. If you want to get really nitpicky, which I like to do in my own pictures, so I'll comment it for you too, is in the very upper right-hand corner. There's a little bit of ice and branch. I would just get rid of that. I would also consider maybe cloning out just a portion of the little icicle that's dropping out of the frame at the bottom too. But those are kind of super nitpicky things, and it isn't something that I like in my images. Maybe it doesn't matter to you, in which case you can just ignore those comments. Okay, thanks.
Framed rose.
You have nice warm colors here, nice details in the rose. I think the frame adds an additional bit of interest that goes beyond just the perfect symmetry of the rose. But I want you to look a little bit more carefully where the petal on the right is supposed to be going over the frame. The masking isn't really perfect there. You might want to consider that. That was probably the most obvious one to me, but there are some other places, like in the upper left-hand area where the petal goes, the masking isn't perfect there. Where the brown frame goes over the petal in the lower left is another area where maybe some little bit finer detail in your masking work would help. It's one of those things, where most people looking at this picture probably aren't even bothered by it, but someone was looking closely. As soon as they noticed that, then suddenly the picture looks fake. And you don't want that to happen if you can avoid it. Thank you.
Racing the Devils.
Great observation and then capture. Making the runner almost insignificant in this picture is critical to the whole emotional appeal of it. So no cropping down from the top. This is fine just like it is. The orange shirt makes sure that the runner doesn't disappear even though he's small. For a moment, I thought about cropping in from the right, but then I discovered that if you do that, it seems to make the dust devils stand still instead of looking like they're running along, racing the runner. So the final analysis said, no, don't touch it. Leave it like it is. Thank you.
Pictorial Masters, 6 images. The straw flower, Cirochrysum rocketum, is both a wonderful cut flower and a dried flower.
Excellent detail and color saturation. The flower is nicely framed by the other leaves and the stem of the other flower. And it's well separated from the distracting elements of the background. So that's working quite nicely. Thank you.
Bee's view.
Yeah, unique perspective. Here we have a close-up view looking down at the tips of the stamens of this flower. That's very interesting. It almost gives you a sense of ambiguity. I mean, I'm not sure you instantly recognize what this is. So it's kind of an interesting graphic element too. One of the tops is pretty centered. It's bright and sharp, and then some of the other ones are now kind of fading off into the distance. So you have a natural flow from the center and then up to the left, which makes me wonder if we might need just a little bit more breathing room between these and the edge of the frame at the top and on the left. Bring it just a little bit down and in, not too much, but just a little bit. Okay, thank you.
Sugar causes decay.
Yeah, good observation. And then the title makes a nice visual pun when combined with the image. Peeling is very clear. I think it seems like that you've managed to usurp the company's mascot there and turned him to your own purposes. So that's kind of an interesting effect. Thanks.
Lone railroad tracks can draw me in like a good intro to a book.
Yeah, there's wonderful use of perspective, getting down low, probably using a wide angle lens, and then getting tremendous depth of field here. So it's drawing you in and disappearing into the distance, and much better with that nice sweeping curve than if it just straight went for the horizon. So low key image, it's all pretty dark, which is generating that moody feeling to it, but then it's highlighted by the reflections off the rail to give you something specific. The rails look like they're almost heading to where the sun is, setting sun, rising sun, whichever. And then there's a kind of an interesting effect that you feel like in front of you, there's nothing but fields, and anything that's a structure is sitting on the horizon, which I also think contributes to the emotional mood of this image. Okay, thanks.
Sweet pea.
Yeah, I think the texture on the background gives the impression of this being printed on like a fine textured rag watercolor paper, which I think gives a nice feel. I think it's working on the very well also on the right hand paddle from my right there. The texture seems stronger on the left hand pedal. It's interesting because it looks considerably different on this screen than it did when I was previewing them. The effect isn't quite as strong here for some reason. I don't know why, because when I was viewing it in preview, the texture formed little tiny loops around the different shades, like you were drawing contour lines, and I found that kind of distracting. Others might see it as an enhancement, but I found it as a distraction. But you don't see it in this presentation, so that's kind of one of the problems I have with electronic images compared to prints, is it can change a lot from one screen to the other, even when everyone's using calibrated monitors. And I don't really understand why that is, but you don't have that problem with prints. Okay, thank you.
Nightlife in Soy Cowboy, home of Bangkok's Ladyboys.
Yeah, this is almost a duotone image of cyan and magenta, which does a couple of different things. First, it expresses the feeling that this is a nightclub-like scene with neon lights providing all the lighting, but it's overall darkness and these kind of colors rather than yellow and red also give it this darkness and moody image. That's not what you expect from neon. So you have kind of this contradiction going on in your mind about this is neon-y, but somehow it's also dark. I think having that one person on the left-hand side in the foreground, and that's really the only the major person who is facing you. Most of the other people are facing away, or they're pretty far in the background. That's kind of the person that's drawing you in and making you feel like you're a participant in this scene. One thing is also interesting is, you know, we talked about this in a couple of other images, that the canonical thing is that the people should be, or creatures or people should be looking into the negative space. And here the person is almost looking out of the frame, and all this area is on the right. I think that actually contributes to the mood of this picture. I think if you could imagine her being on the right-hand side and looking into the seed, it would have a totally different emotional feeling. Okay, thank you.
Okay, another 5-minute break. Creative Basic, 3 images. Third place, Elizabeth.
Thank you. This started out with one of the oil and water projects, but I used the image in my iPad first and then put the oil and water on the top. And then as I've been working with Photoshop, I enhanced the oil drops with Photoshop. So I used like multiple elements of photography in this one, but thank you.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Really beautiful.
Congratulations. Second place, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually a stack of flowers at the Bangkok flower market. And I was trying to find out what flowers they were. I'm not sure, but just a vibrant stack of colors. And so I was playing with some of the filters in Photoshop to come up with this.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Nice. And first place, Mark.
I like this one. Mark here?
Yeah, Mark's here. But Mark is muted.
Oh,
Are you there, Mark? Beautiful image.
yeah, great idea. I liked it.
Great idea. I like the contrast, sharpness. Okay. Creative intermediate, 3 images. Third place, Ellen.
Yeah, this was just fun. I was walking through the Sonoma Plaza and there were 5 Lamborghinis lined up with their doors open. And I had about 3 minutes before they all roared off. But I just had the idea that I needed to do something with them. So here they are. I love this.
How did you develop the curve in the cars?
You know, I was playing with Photoshop and I'm not quite sure. I guess it was, I forget what the tool's called. It's a swirl, and I got it, and then I tried to do it again and I couldn't. So I can't tell you exactly.
Probably the smudge tool.
Yeah, especially with the people in the background sharp or reasonably sharp, you know, it's a nice contrast.
But yeah, what I did was with all the warping, and then I cut it out and pasted it back again on the original background.
Cool.
Nice.
And I made the wheel, I redid the wheel. I didn't want that warped. So
Yeah. Great job.
Nice.
Ah,
Really nice. Second place, Ronnie.
Oh, thank you. So this is a gotta remember what it is. What flower it is. It might be a ranunculus, but I'm not sure. I brought it into Topaz Studio 2, and this is a motion blur, and so I blurred the skirt, and I made the head dark, and I thought it was fun.
It was fun.
Congratulations.
yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
First place, Pat.
Oh my, thank you so much. Yeah, this is we've been through a lot of fire, our family has. Yeah, and so something to do with fire, and this horse said it to me, running, fleeing from it. We're still rebuilding, we're up here tonight, trying to get some things done before the contractors come tomorrow. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you.
Congratulations. Creative Advance, 3 images. Third place, Bill Clark, who is not here, I believe. Second place, Philip.
Yeah, yeah, this is one of my neighbor's trees, and he had Christmas lights on it. You know, most of the lighting came from either the lights on the tree or the lights from the house, which are, you know, just out of view. I had taken multiple exposures, and one of them was, you know, hand motion. So the lights on the tree ended up creating the streaking motion that once the pictures were merged, we get the end result here.
Great.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Third place, Tara. And I don't see Tara.
I knew it.
Very nice.
That's a Tara image.
That's great.
Creative Masters, 4 images. Liz.
She got kicked out. I don't think she's been able to get back in. She tried through the website and it wouldn't let her back in.
Oh,
That's It's really appealing picture.
Third place, Terry. And I don't see Terry.
Terry? Isn't, she was there.
She was, but I don't think she's here now.
Oh.
Second place, Mike.
Thank you very much. That was actually a double exposure during our scavenger hunt in downtown Petaluma. It was taken before sunrise. Both vertical and horizontal was the double exposures, and the train was just coming in up on the upper left. If I had slowed it, I mean, increased the shutter speed just a little bit, we might have seen more of the train, but it was, I thought it looked sort of futuristic, so that's why I did it. Thank you very much.
Very nice. Congratulations. Tim, first place.
Thank you. This building is a mirror building in San Francisco. And the only thing I did was rotate it to the right. My 90 degrees, and that's all.
Wow.
I don't know whether or not people can hear me or not.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Great image.
Yeah.
We knew that was a Tim image.
Yeah. I knew exactly. Knew exactly who.
Definitely Escher like.
Yeah. Exactly.
Love it.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Tim. Monochrome, basic, 3 images. Third place, Mark. I don't think Mark is back. Great image, Mark. Second place, Kauai Peaks, Fritz.
That's from our backpacking trips up in the High Sierra.
Beautiful.
Gorgeous shot. Congratulations. First place, Laura.
Thank you. I took that before I got into photography. And I was trying to work with some of the software, and I thought the clouds kind of looked off, but I don't know. I think that's the way they were, but I'm not sure if the software may have done something, but thank you. And I appreciate your constructive critique on all the photos.
Beautiful shot.
Nice shot.
Yeah, really nice.
Where was that, Laura?
That was in Hanam Bay in Vietnam.
It's actually beautiful. I like the mist.
It's the main tourist attraction. She went on a tour.
Nice. Monochrome intermediate, 3 images. Third place, Sherry.
Oh, thank you. I spotted this on a walk in downtown Petaluma. Thanks.
Love this.
Yeah, really cool.
Congratulations. Second place, Greg.
This is my sister's Cadillac, and she keeps it in a farm building. And I've always wanted to go in there and look at it, but it was always really dark and there's no lighting inside, and it was really hard to get the doors open. But last August, a big windstorm came through and blew the doors off and revealed this car. And I looked at it when I was there a few weeks ago, and I said, I got to take some photographs of this. And this was the best one I shot.
Nice shot.
Thank you.
Congratulations. First place, Ronnie.
Thank you.
Nice. Very nice.
Thank you. This is a flowering kale, ornamental kale, which I just love to look at it. And I took some shots in color, obviously. Well, yeah, in color, and it was really pretty, but I decided to see what I could bring out in black and white. And I love the edge, that the edge makes, to me, makes the image. It's so lacy. So thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Monochrome with that's 5 images. Jennifer.
Nice.
Very nice.
What? Oh, thank you. Yeah, this was, that was all natural light, and it's a regular, it's not infrared. It's up on the north coast in a second growth redwood forest. Anyway, thank you.
Very nice.
Beautiful, Jennifer.
Yes.
Honorable mention, Phil.
This was taken at the Rivertown Revival in Petaluma back in 2019.
Love it.
Thank you.
Third place, Linda. I don't know. I don't see Linda.
She's not here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Nice shot.
Second place, Bob.
Oh, thank you. I had submitted this in color at last month's competition, and it didn't win any prizes, but I liked the composition. I liked the texture, so I thought I'd give it a crack in monochrome, and I guess it paid off.
Good job.
Yeah, really good job.
Really nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
First place, Steve. I don't believe Steve is here.
I think he's in Arizona or someplace.
Okay.
He's back.
Oh, is he? Oh,
That's just wonderful.
Masters, monochrome, 4 images. And we'll mention Mike.
Yeah, thanks. I took this obviously down in the city. I had entered a photo a few years ago of the building on the left, and it did well, but I had this, and so I was going through images trying to find one, and I did correct this. Believe it or not, it was a lot worse than it was. But thanks for the comments, and I appreciate it.
Congratulations. Third place, Tamara. Tamara's not here. Second place, Tony.
This was shot at Canyon X, which is about 30 or 40 miles from Antelope Canyon. I was busy shooting the sandstone, and then this friend of mine stepped in the light, and I was about to yell at him, and then I saw the picture.
Great image.
Very nice.
Very good.
And first place, Tamara.
Tomorrow.
So unusual, really beautiful.
What do you think that central dark vertical image is? Is that reflection? I mean, there's nothing above the pool that it represents.
Those are in the pool.
Yeah, it's a combination of these posts in the pool with their reflection.
Right.
Uh-huh.
It's just stunning. There's so
Yeah,
much.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
Nature, basic, 3 images. Third place, Fritz.
Well, another Namibian picture. Thank you for the advice on the putting more information in the title. Thank you.
Congratulations. Second place, Laura. You're on mute, Laura.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, I took that actually and while waiting for a client near his pool area. So there was just some greenery and they breed around his pool. So I didn't have much choice for background, but the information you gave on providing more information on maybe a detail or something in what you see in nature is great. I'm new to this, so I have a lot to learn, but that was really helpful. So thank you.
In first place, Mark.
Here or not here?
He's here, but he's not here. Nature intermediate, 4 images. Pat, honorable mention.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, this is a water hole and we're thirsty zebra. And thanks for your advice. I appreciate it.
Third place, Betsy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.
Beautiful shot. Second place, Greg.
Yeah, these falcons are actually nesting on our property. And so I've been watching them a long time and photographing them. And this one was kind of an unusual shot because they were together in a place where I could actually capture it. And the thing that I regretted not putting in the title is that this is in a burn zone. And I did want to show more of the habitat, but I didn't really show I didn't even talk about the habitat. And you just can't get close enough to these birds because of their eyesight. They can spot anything, you know, a mile away. And if you're unnatural in their habitat, they don't pose like this. But anyway, they're a lot of fun. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Great.
Nice captain.
In first place, Sherry.
Oh, thank you so much. I took this hiking and I only had my cell phone. It's a Google Pixel 2. So Ronnie, to your question about whether or not, you know, a camera phone is effective. So I saw this blue dix and it was kind of weighted down, and I looked over and I noticed that there was this bee there, this bumblebee. And so I turned the flower over and I was totally shocked to see this spider. Wow. And he had gripped this bumblebee right behind his head. If you zoom in, and I know you can't on the screen, but you can see his eyes and everything. And I can see how he would just be totally camouflaged with the white part of the blue dix flower. So I wish it weren't a bee, but there you have it.
Unbelievable image.
Good for you to
Fabulous
that. Fantastic.
That's a wonderful capture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Nature Advanced, 4 images. Honorable mention, Tara. Tara is not here tonight. Third place for Linda. Linda is not here either. Great shot though. I really like these 2 shots.
Yeah.
Second place, Jennifer. I knew it.
Yeah, that was great.
Great shots, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah, very
In
good.
my own backyard too.
Mhm.
This
Wow.
guy is always welcome in my backyard. If we have more gophers, I
He's
swear.
welcome in mine too.
How long did it take him to get that down his gullet?
Very short time, amazingly short time. Just flipped that thing and swallowed it so fast, I couldn't believe it.
Did he put his beak down the hole?
Not all quite down the hole. And then I didn't get that shot off quick enough. He spotted it and he just moved like blinding speed and had that thing in his mouth. And he kept it there. I think he was trying to kill it first before he swallowed it. Because he held it, not trying to eat it, for about a minute, and then all of a sudden he flips it and grabs it and swallowed it really fast. It was amazing to watch, just amazing. Thank you very much.
Great capture.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing shot.
Yeah, great shot. And first place, Herb.
Wow, thank you very much. This was actually taken in March of this year and is the third year I've been trying to capture these guys. Each time we go there, I'm amazed to see them. And it's as Doug mentioned, it's not as easy to get them as it may appear. They're quick and everything goes real fast and the field of focus isn't that deep. So I'm glad to finally have nailed it. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.
Congratulations.
How shallow is the water?
It's just amazing.
Literally 2 or 3 inches.
2 or 3 inches. Huh?
Yeah. And well, you can see that in this last picture, his tail is sticking up and his head is in the bottom. So that's probably less than 1.5 inches.
Wow.
And the challenge is finding a spot where you can get a camera close enough to them without scaring them away, because they're very territorial. So it takes a little bit of nudging.
Huh,
Nice work.
Thank you.
really nice.
Nature Masters, 5 images. Honorable mention, Tamara.
Oh, I love this.
I do too.
Yeah.
Wonderful. What a sense of place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honorable mention, Tim.
It would have to be an architectural animal.
This is where it took place. Thank you.
Well done.
Where was it, Tim?
Living desert near Salmon Zoo.
Okay. Never been there.
Well, going.
Congratulations.
Uh-huh.
Third place, Liz.
Wow.
This was in her backyard. She planted parsley and was amazed at the number of bugs that showed up and how exotic they all were.
Wow.
I'll let her know.
Second
Yeah.
place, Ian.
Nice.
Is not here.
No, I know she's gone too. This was on a trip to Pinnacle Gulch Beach at low tide, super low tide. It was an amazing place.
Great shot. Good information.
Yeah, nice. Really nice. Oops, that's me. Thank you very much. I'm glad I got away with the fun fact. Took these 2 pictures from a pack rafts in the spring lake. So I was just sitting there at the shore, and this guy, after about half an hour, just sitting there trying to take a picture of a killdeer, he came whomp, whomp, whomp flying in and walked right in front of me. Didn't even notice me. He was in a branch above me.
Great shots.
Wow.
So thank you very much. Pictorial basic 2 images. Elizabeth,
Pretty.
second place.
Thank you. The water in December is just so spectacular. I have to go back again soon. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a great place.
First place, Fritz.
So I appreciate the comment on the rusty color in the image. It really had to do with the fact that there was a fire going on. It's called a rough fire.
Ah,
You actually see some of the
Oh,
plumes in the real Milky Way above. But I'm a Milky Way guy, and we're it's Milky Way season right now, guys. So now's the time to get out and look at it.
Nice job. Nice shot. Beautiful. 3 images, intermediate. Third place, Betsy.
Oh, thank you very much. I took this as at the same place I took the blue heron, which is down in Elkhorn Slough. Oh, yeah, this was really a fun. I put the camera on burst mode, and I got the mom and the pup in a number of different kissing poses. But this was my favorite. And I appreciate your comments, Doug, you know, about maybe cropping off the right-hand side, and I'll work with that.
Yes. Second place, Greg.
Yeah, I also like your comment about cropping. And given the choice, I think I would crop on the left-hand side because I just can't bring myself to cropping off a rainbow.
Yeah.
But just a little fun fact, if we're throwing out fun facts, on these double rainbows, the colors are reversed. It's like there's like a focal plane between the rainbows, and it goes, you know, on the left-hand side, it starts out on the left as purple. On the right-hand side, the purple's on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really noticed this until just last week. We were in the De Young Museum, and there's a painting in there that has a actually much better defined double rainbow, and that's exactly how they painted it.
Oh,
So you probably all know that, but it was kind of a discovery for me.
I didn't know that.
Did not know that.
not know that.
Thank you.
Nice. In first place, Ronnie.
Oh, thank you. Your points are well taken. I knew that flower on the right didn't have enough breathing room. I need to expand my studio to take pictures, to take pictures of a subject like this. This is a huge bouquet that I got for Valentine's Day. And it was just too large for the space. That green and white flower in the center is actually a cabbage.
I was wondering about that.
It's a miniature cabbage, and that little jewel in the center it's an earring that I don't know. I thought it belonged there.
So clever.
I
That's
just
a
love
nice
that
touch.
color, and the color just went there. So, but
Yeah.
I agree. I'd like to reshoot it if someday, or something similar with more space at the bottom. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very nice.
So we'll advance 4 images. Linda, honorable mention.
Nice, Linda.
Oh, so beautiful.
Great shot. Bob, third place.
Wow, thank you. I guess I'm big on California poppies tonight.
Yeah.
I had a lot of them in the front of the house, and this was one grouping which I just liked. The background, I guess, was some green foliage which I darkened during processing, and the lighting was Mother Nature's contribution. I just took advantage of it.
Beautiful.
Nice.
I like the stroke too.
Oh, thank you.
Second place, Herb.
Wow, thank you. This
great.
was taken, I'm gonna look now, 2020, September 2020, on Lake Powell. We were boat camping, and I've got, a zillion of the images that you expect to get from Lake Powell boat camping and landscapes and so forth. But I got off the boat one night and just wandered around, and this really struck me. And I'm still hard pressed to tell exactly where on this is a sandstone seep, and there's algae growing on it, but there's also a pool on the bottom. So there's a reflection of the sandstone seep. And I kept the flowers and the rock in the foreground just to make the impression that it actually is a real place. So appreciated the comments, and I'm glad it was appreciated. Thank you.
What did you do to create that texture and surreal feeling to it?
This is essentially out of camera.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I'll give away the secrets here. The flower bunch on the lower left is copied from the right, just to balance it out a little bit. And I added some little green flowers in the orange large expanse where it became too much monotone, just to break it up a little bit. And the title maybe was over obvious, but I had learned from experience that sometimes being subtle is not the best choice. So thank you.
The title absolutely captures what I see. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, it sure does.
Great.
Great. Stunning. It's stunning.
Yeah.
This image.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Bill.
Mm.
Oh,
Herb.
thank you again.
Scores.
This was September of 2019, and my wife and I were camping in the Alvarez Desert, and I like to go to places where no one else goes. And this is literally southeastern Oregon, and we could not get a hotel for 4 or 5 days. So she was a trooper for camping in the truck, and I wanted to go out on the desert itself. And while we were out there, I had the good sense to sit down and suck a gin and tonic, while she went out and got some fitness in. And so she was running around, and I was drinking with a camera and a telephoto lens on a tripod. And this is essentially what happened. So I appreciate it.
Great, Jimmy, great story.
Thank you.
Masters, 4 images. Liz, honorable mention. Liz isn't here.
Nope, there's a truck that parks at the Mexican market down the street from us. And Liz and I on walks, we kind of always stop right at this truck because we just both love the scene. So I'll let her know. Thanks.
It's a really great image.
Fun.
Yep. Third place, Tony.
Thank you. I've always been in love with straw flowers. I've never grown them, but I'd go to the grocery store and pick them up. And they would be pretty for a while in the house. And then I'd hang them up in the attic or in the basement. And they were just as beautiful in the winter.
Nice shot.
Beautiful.
Beautiful colors.
Thank you.
Second place, Nancy.
Well, I'd like to say that I'm absolutely thrilled that you got it. That just what I was going for, you saw, and that doesn't always the case. I wanted to have kind of a sorted Moulin Rouge, Toulouse-Lautrec kind of coloring, especially on the subject's face, with the colors not being, I did color grading, and also, as you said, not choosing the standard, say blue for shadow and yellow or red or whatever for highlights, but to get it to just be this feeling of what I like a cognitive dissonance. And that's what this soy cowboy area is like. The lady boys are, you don't know if they're the people who are there working are men or women, because that's just part of what the scene is. And what they do, I was told, we all know our friend Lou Jean, she says, when you go there, don't take any photographs. They'll hurt you. And I was shooting carefully, but what I noticed is basically what they do is they just turn their backs to you or turn their heads. So I got just a few people who happened to be, well, two main that happened to be looking with the main one. And that's just exactly what I wanted to capture. You don't know quite what's happening, but something is amiss. So I'm really thrilled that this came through. So thank you very much.
Very nice.
Really otherworldly.
Very nice. Very nice, Nancy.
It's really nice. First place, Tony.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Mike and I were down in the wetlands at the south end of Napa, right along the bay there. And we're there at sunrise, and all I know is at sunrise you have to shoot very fast, because when the sun breaks, everything changes. And this, out of about 30 or 40 ones, gave me the best feel. And I hoped I had it. You just don't know until you get home. Thank you.
Really nice.
Nice image.
Congratulations.
Beautiful. Congratulations.
And with the drum roll, best of show for the evening.
Oh my God.
Nice. Congratulations.
I
Very
can
good.
go back down there. Thank you.
Great shot.
Congratulations.
Congrats,
Very
Tony.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Doug, thank you very much for a great
You're
evening.
most welcome.
Yeah.
We enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciated your judging.
You're welcome. My
Yeah.
pleasure.
Well done.